Get out of my way, old man. Kira didn't even look at me when she said it. She just walked past me carrying a box of my late wife's china like it belonged to her. That was the moment I knew. My son had turned into a woman who saw me as furniture in the way. My name is Jude Robinson. I'm 71 years old, and until that Tuesday in Charleston, South Carolina, I believed my son Peter had turned into a good man. I raised him better than this. I raised him to respect his elders, to protect his family. But standing in the doorway of the house I built with my own hands, watching his wife pack up my dead wife's dishes without asking, I understood something had gone very wrong. If you're watching this, drop the city you're from in the comments. I want to know how far this story travels before it's done. It started 3 weeks earlier. Peter called me on a Sunday, his voice tight in a way I hadn't heard since he was a boy caught lying about a broken window. "Dad, we need to talk. Can we come by?" They showed up that afternoon, Peter looking like he hadn't slept, and Kira dressed like she was heading to a luncheon, not a family crisis. She sat down on my couch without being asked and looked around my living room like she was pricing it. "Dad," Peter said, "I lost my job. In the house, we're behind on the mortgage. 6 months behind." I felt my stomach drop. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" Kira answered before he could. "Because we didn't need you sticking your nose in our finances, Jude." She said my name like it tasted bad in her mouth. I ignored her. "How much do you need?" "It's not that simple anymore," Peter said. "The bank's already started foreclosure. We're going to lose the house next month." I sat down across from them, my hands shaking slightly. "Then move in here. This house is paid off. There's room." Kira's eyes lit up, not with gratitude, but with something colder, calculating. "Actually," she said, "this house is worth $400,000 easy. You're one old man rattling around in 5 bedrooms. It makes more sense for you to sign it over to us. We fix our credit, refinance, and you live here with us like family should." I stared at her. "Sign over my house?" "It's practically going to be ours anyway one day," she shrugged like she was discussing the weather. "Why wait?" That was the first time I saw it clearly. Not a daughter-in-law who needed help, but a woman who saw my home as an inheritance she was owed early. "No," I said, "this house stays in my name." Kira's jaw tightened. "Peter, tell your father how this works." Peter wouldn't meet my eyes. "Dad, please, we have nowhere else to go." "You can stay here," I said again, "as guests, not as owners." I should have known that wasn't the end of it. People like Kira don't stop asking. They start taking. 2 days later, they moved in. 3 moving trucks, far more than temporary should require. And by the end of that first week, I came home from my Tuesday doctor's appointment to find Kira in my late wife's sewing room, boxing up her dresses, her jewelry, 28 years of a woman's life folded into cardboard like garage sale junk. "What are you doing?" I asked, my voice breaking. "Making room," Kira said flatly. "This is going to be the nursery." "Nursery?" She smiled, the kind of smile that has no warmth behind it at all. "Peter and I are expecting. Didn't he tell you?" I turned to my son, standing in the hallway, saying nothing. That's when I understood this wasn't a family in crisis asking for help. This was a woman clearing out a dead woman's belongings to make space for a life she hadn't earned, in a house she didn't own, married to a man who no longer had the spine to stop her. And she wasn't finished yet, not even close.
3 days after I found Margaret's dresses in boxes, my mailman handed me something odd. A thick stack of what looked like bills forwarded from a P.O. box I'd never opened in my life. "Started coming to that box about 6 weeks back, Mr. Robinson," he said. "Figured they were meant for you since your name's on 'em." I stood in my driveway and opened the first envelope right there. A credit card statement. My name on it. A balance of $9,000 I had never spent. My chest went tight. I drove straight to Coastal Trust Bank, thinking maybe it was some kind of clerical error, something that could be untangled with one phone call. "Mr. Robinson, I'm not seeing anything unusual on your checking or savings with us," the teller said after pulling up my accounts. "But if you're getting statements from cards you don't recognize, that's not us. That's a separate line of credit entirely. You'll want to check your full credit file." I thanked her and sat in my truck in the parking lot for a long moment, doing the kind of math a man doesn't want to do. Someone had my social security number. Someone had enough personal information to open accounts and redirect the mail so I'd never see the bills. And there was only one person who'd asked me for something official in the last 2 months. When I got home, Kira was in the kitchen and Peter was at the table with his laptop open, not really looking at it. "I need to ask you something," I said, setting the opened statement on the table in front of Kira. "Do you know anything about this?" She glanced at it for half a second. "No idea what that is. It's a credit card in my name, statements forwarded to a P.O. box I've never used. Funny, because 3 weeks ago, you asked me for a copy of my bank statement for the mortgage paperwork, you said." For half a second, something flickered behind her eyes. Not guilt, just recalculation, like a woman adjusting a losing hand of cards. "That was for the refinance application, Jude. Nothing to do with this." "Peter," I turned to my son, "did you know about this?" He wouldn't look up from the laptop. "Dad, I'm sure it's a misunderstanding, probably some data breach thing." "A data breach that happens to know I'd hand your wife my bank statement." Kira's voice sharpened. "You have more money than you need, Jude. You're one man in a 5-bedroom house. We have a baby coming. Is it really so unforgivable if we needed a little help along the way?" "So you admit it?" "I didn't admit anything, Jude. I said maybe you're being paranoid. Maybe you've been forgetting things lately, and now you're looking for someone to blame." The words landed like a slap. "I haven't forgotten a single thing in my life, Kira. Not one." She crossed her arms and looked at me the way you'd look at a stubborn child. "We'll see." That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat at my kitchen table with coffee going cold in front of me, running through every document I'd handed her, every form she'd asked me to sign just as a formality. At 2 a.m., I heard footsteps in the hallway outside my bedroom door, slow, careful, stopping right outside before retreating back down the hall. By morning, there was a stack of mail sitting on my kitchen table that hadn't been there the night before. 5 more envelopes, all addressed to me, all from credit card companies I'd never contacted in my life. I opened the first one. Account approved, $15,000 credit limit. My name, my social security number, that same P.O. box. Whoever was doing this hadn't just started. They'd been building this for weeks, and they weren't finished yet. I drove downtown that morning with the stack of mail on the passenger seat, straight to the credit reporting office. "I need my full credit report," I told the man behind the desk. "Every account, every inquiry, going back 6 months." It took him 10 minutes to print it. When he handed it over, I felt the floor tilt under me. 4 credit cards opened over the past 2 months, totaling nearly $60,000 in available credit. 3 of them already maxed out. A jewelry store in Mount Pleasant, a car dealership down on Rivers Avenue, cash advances totaling $12,000. "Sir," the man said gently, "based on the pattern here, new mailing address, multiple accounts opened close together, this has the fingerprints of identity theft. You'll want a police report filed today and a fraud alert on all 3 bureaus." I called my attorney, Marcus Webb, from the parking lot before I'd even started the truck. "Jude, slow down and tell me what you found." I read him the numbers. $60,000, 4 accounts, a P.O. box I'd never opened. "This is serious," Marcus said. "Identity theft and financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult carries real weight under South Carolina law. We're talking felony charges, restitution, the works. But we need to prove who did it." "I already know who did it," I said. When I got home, Kira was sitting at my kitchen table, calm as still water, a cup of tea in front of her, like she'd been expecting me. "You went to the credit bureau," she said, not a question. 4 credit cards, Kira, $60,000, all in my name. She didn't even blink. "We needed the money, Jude. The mortgage, the baby coming. You weren't going to help us fast enough on your own. So you stole my identity?" "We borrowed your name," she said, like the distinction mattered. "We were always going to pay it back." "With what? You maxed 3 of the 4 cards out in 8 weeks." For the first time, something like panic flickered behind her eyes, quickly smoothed back over. "It's just numbers on paper, Jude. Nobody has to know." "The credit bureau already knows. Marcus is filing a police report this afternoon." She stood up so fast the chair scraped hard against the floor. "You can't do that. Peter will lose everything. His job, his record, everything because of a piece of plastic." "Peter didn't do this," I said quietly. "You did it, and you're the one who's going to answer for it." Her face went cold, all pretense gone. "We'll see about that." That night, past midnight, I heard the front door open and close. Quiet, careful, someone trying not to wake me. I got up and found the garage door standing open, the dome light in my truck on, and a manila folder sitting on the driver's seat that hadn't been there an hour before. Inside was a single printed sheet, my complete online banking credentials, account numbers, passwords, security question answers. Information only one person in that house could have gathered. Taped to the top was a sticky note in Kira's handwriting. "Last chance. Drop the police report or everything in these accounts disappears by Friday." She wasn't running from what she'd done. She was threatening to finish it.
I filed the police report myself that morning, sitting across from Detective Ray Alvarez at the North Charleston Sheriff's Substation, sliding the folder of statements across his desk like it might explode. "Mr. Robinson, walk me through the timeline again," he said, pen ready. I did. The bank statement I'd handed her weeks ago, the P.O. box, the 4 accounts, $60,000, the sticky note threatening to drain what was left. Alvarez read the note twice, then looked up. "This note is a direct threat tied to financial crime. That changes things. You said this is your daughter-in-law?" "Kira Robinson, married to my son, Peter." He typed the name into his system and something on his face shifted. "Give me a minute." He came back with a printout. "Mr. Robinson, this isn't the first time this name has come up. There's an open fraud complaint out of Savannah, Georgia, filed 8 months ago by Thomas Whitfield. Elder financial exploitation, similar pattern. Case went cold when the family declined to press charges." My stomach dropped. "She's done this before?" "Looks that way. And there's a name flagged alongside hers, a Rory Sinclair in Savannah. Possible accomplice, never charged." I sat back in the chair, the room feeling smaller. This wasn't a woman who'd made one desperate mistake under financial pressure. This was a pattern, a method. "I want everything you have on that Savannah case," I said. "I'll reach out to their department today. In the meantime, we're issuing a warrant for Kira Robinson's arrest on identity theft and financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult. I'd also recommend you change every password, freeze your credit completely, and consider a restraining order given that note." I drove home with my hands steady for the first time in weeks. Not calm, steady. The kind of steady that comes when a man finally has the truth in writing instead of just a bad feeling in his gut. When I pulled into my driveway, Peter was sitting on the front steps alone with a duffel bag at his feet. "She's gone," he said before I even got out of the truck. "Took the car, cleaned out what was left in the checking account. I think she's headed back to Savannah." I stood over him, looking at my son, thinner than I remembered, hollowed out in a way that had nothing to do with sleep. "Dad, did you know about Savannah? About Thomas Whitfield?" His head snapped up. "What?" "She did this before, son, to another family. There's an open case." I watched the color drain out of his face, watched 28 years of believing he'd married the love of his life collapse in real time. Dad, I swear to you, I had no idea. I believe you, and I meant it. But we need to talk to Detective Alvarez together, tonight. We drove back to the station in near silence. Peter gave his statement for over an hour. Every withdrawal he'd questioned and been talked out of, every excuse he'd swallowed because he loved her, every red flag he'd explained away because he loved her. When we walked out, it was almost 10 p.m., the parking lot lit orange under the sodium lights. Mr. Robinson, Alvarez caught up to us at the truck with his phone in hand. Savannah PD just got back to me. Kira Robinson was picked up 2 hours ago, trying to board a flight out of Atlanta Jackson under a different last name. She had 4 IDs in her bag. None of them said Kira Robinson. Different names? Peter went white. Different names? Heidi Jackson, Brooke Sinclair, Neve Callahan. Alvarez read off the list from his phone. She's been doing this for years, generally. You're not her first family. You might not even be her last if we don't get everything on record. I looked at my son standing under those orange lights, watching his entire marriage collapse into a stranger's rap sheet, and I understood something I hadn't let myself believe until that moment. We hadn't just uncovered a theft. We'd uncovered a woman who didn't have her own name, only the one she borrowed to survive on other people's money. And somewhere in a holding cell in Atlanta, she was already working on the next one.
The trial took place 4 months later in a Charleston County courtroom that smelled like old carpet and stronger coffee than they served. I sat in the second row with Peter beside me, both of us in suits we didn't wear often, waiting for a woman who had worn so many names that the prosecutor needed an index card just to keep him straight. Kiera Robinson, Heidi Jackson, Brooke Sinclair, Neve Callahan. 4 names, 1 woman, and a trail of victims stretching from Savannah to Charleston to a small town in Tennessee nobody had connected until Detective Alvarez started digging. The Savannah case belonged to a man named Thomas Whitfield, 78 years old, who lost $11,000 and, according to the file, most of his trust in his own daughter before he passed away the previous winter, never seen a single dollar of it returned. The Tennessee case belonged to a widow named Carol Ann Pruitt, who flown in just to testify, sitting 2 rows behind me with her hands folded so tightly her knuckles had gone white. When the prosecutor called me to the stand, I told the truth plainly, the way I'd told it to Detective Alvarez the first day. The bank statement I'd handed over in good faith, the credit cards, the sticky note threatening to drain what was left. I didn't dress it up, and I didn't need to. The facts did the work on their own. Kiera's attorney tried, briefly, to paint me as a confused old man who'd misplaced his own paperwork. I watched the jury's faces while he said it, and not one of them looked convinced. Maybe it was the 4 names on the whiteboard behind him. Maybe it was Carol Ann Pruitt's white knuckles 2 rows back. Either way, it didn't stick. Peter testified too. I hadn't expected it to be as hard on him as it clearly was, watching my son describe, in a shaking voice, every excuse he'd swallowed, every red flag he'd talked himself out of because he loved her and didn't want to believe what his gut was telling him. When he stepped down from the stand, he didn't look at Kiera once, not out of anger, out of something closer to grief for the version of her he'd invented in his head. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. When they came back, the foreman read the verdict in a flat, even voice. Guilty on all counts. Identity theft, financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult, and, because of the note she'd left in my truck, a felony threat charge on top of it. The judge sentenced her to 9 years, with restitution ordered for every victim the prosecution could prove, starting with mine. Kiera didn't look at me as they let her out. She looked at Peter just once, and whatever she was trying to say with that look, my son didn't return it. He just watched her go, and something in his shoulders loosened that I hadn't realized had been locked tight for months. Outside the courthouse, Peter and I stood on the steps in the late afternoon sun, neither of us saying much for a while. I keep thinking about all the things I ignored, the missing statements, the way she always had an answer ready before I even finished the question. I wanted to believe her so badly I stopped asking. That's not a flaw in you, son.
That's what people like her count on. You didn't fail. You trusted somebody who was never worth it.
He nodded slowly, staring out at the parking lot like he was seeing something further away than the cars. What happens now? With the house? With any of it? The house stays standing, I said. So do we. It took the better part of a year to fully untangle everything, closing the fraudulent accounts, working with the credit bureaus to clear my name, filing the restitution paperwork that would trickle in slowly, a little at a time for years. Marcus handled most of it. I mostly just had to sign my name over and over again on documents that finally, for once, were actually mine to sign. Peter moved into a small apartment across town, started seeing a counselor twice a month, something I never would have pictured him doing when he was younger, and something I was quietly, deeply proud of now. He got a new job at a logistics company downtown. Nothing glamorous, but steady, honest, entirely his own. He came by the house most Sundays, and we'd sit on the back porch the way we used to before any of this started, not talking about Kira at all, just about ordinary things. Baseball, the garden, whether the Braves had a shot this year. I kept Margaret's sewing room exactly the way she'd left it. I never did let anyone touch it again. 6 months after the trial, I got a letter from Carol Ann Pruitt, the widow from Tennessee. She wanted to thank me for testifying, for giving the prosecution enough to finally connect the cases. She said it was the first time in 2 years she'd felt like someone believed her. I wrote back and told her the truth, that none of us had done anything except refuse to stay quiet, and that was apparently more than most people expect from folks our age. Sometimes, late in the evening, sitting on my porch with a cup of coffee going lukewarm in my hands, I think about that first week. Kira and Margaret's sewing room, boxing up 28 years of a woman's life like it was garage sale junk. I think about how easily I could have let it go, could have signed whatever she put in front of me just to keep the peace, could have decided I was too old and too tired to fight for what was mine. I didn't, and I'm glad every single day that I didn't. People assume that getting older means getting smaller, quieter, easier to overlook, easier to push past in your own doorway. I used to believe that too, somewhere in the back of my mind, in the years after Margaret passed, when the house got quiet and I got used to being the person nobody consulted. But I found out something different that year. Getting older doesn't mean you stop having a voice. It just means you finally know exactly when to raise it. The house on Ashwood Lane is still standing. So am I. And for the first time in a long while, that feels like more than enough.